Hear that? That's the sound of peace, knowing your next travel adventure is sorted. At Intrepid Travel, we take care of everything, so you don't have to. Join a small group adventure in the United States or Canada and let our local leaders show you the hard-to-find spots in familiar destinations. Whether you're kayaking through the Alaskan wilderness or following the music trail from Nashville to New Orleans, Intrepid's trips will take you deeper, supporting local communities along the way. Head to intrepidtravel.com to book your next adventure. Intrepid Travel. Good trips only.
Hi, I'm David Eagleman. I have a new podcast called Inner Cosmos on iHeart. I'm going to explore the relationship between our brains and our experiences by tackling unusual questions like, can we create new senses for humans? So join me weekly to uncover how your brain steers your behavior, your perception, and your reality. Listen to Inner Cosmos with David Eagleman on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. Hello, you DIY punk and hardcore champions. Thank you for listening to this particular show. And I know that may sound a little trite just to be like, oh, thank you for downloading. Because, I mean, every podcast has that. But I genuinely mean it. I know many of my friends that also do podcasts also mean it. But it's a special thing to be able to create this relationship, not only with each other as listeners on both sides of the speaker, so to speak, but then also, more importantly, with the people who are creating the stuff that we care about, whether it's documenting it, putting it out, punk, hardcore, metal, emo, whatever it is, as long as it falls under the banner of DIY. And I know that could be a very broad term, but that's what this show operates in. And today I'm very excited to welcome my friend Joe Musten. He plays in a band called Beloved. He also played in a band called Advent. I guess technically plays in both of them because Advent technically didn't break up. They play some shows occasionally. And Beloved did a much publicized reunion last year at Furnace Fest. And I want to have Joe on for quite some time because I personally, I love Beloved and Advent. I just think both those bands are perfect for what they do. And we met many moons ago, playing some shows together, and I just felt, I felt a real connection with him, really enjoyed spending time with him, and I was like, I want to get to know him a little bit better. He's a real thoughtful dude, and definitely wears his heart in his sleeve in a very positive way, and I guess technically, I don't know, I think heart in the sleeve is where I live, and I know many other people live, but anyways, had to have Joe on, so that's what we were doing. You, as the listener, can support the show by emailing me, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. You can also leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, or you can leave a rating on Spotify. That is, it just helps out the algorithm. That's plain and simple. I don't want to bore you with those intimate details, but it just helps people discover this thing. And then also, I will be in the United Kingdom at Outbreak Fest in late June, doing some live podcasts from that event. I'm very excited to go back there. It's going to be a great time, in my opinion, because I had a great time last year, and I'm setting up some of these chats now, and it's going to be a great time. So let's just go ahead and dive into the discussion with Joe. Nothing to announce from the sort of Beloved or Advent perspective, but this is not really this is not booked on cycle in regards to Joe's doing a press campaign or anything. This is literally me DMing Joe, and we made it happen. I'll take you back to a small, sweaty room in Iowa, if I am not mistaken, where Taken and Beloved played together. We did not know each other, but you did some dates. I want to say, so like Every Time I Die, can't remember who else was playing. But
holy crap.
I know, dude. This was a long time ago.
I know exactly what show you're talking about.
Yeah, Second Story, like hotter than, a witch's tit or whatever people say. But
yeah. We played there multiple times. That was a cool spot. Like something Rock Island.
Island? Nail in the head. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. Okay. Yeah, Rock Island, Illinois. It wasn't Iowa. It was Illinois. You're right.
But it was super close.
You're right. It was
Was
like
it
across the
Sunrise?
river.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Quad Cities, I think, as they call it. But I remember the show so vividly because it was, any melodic-ish hardcore band. Like when you saw another band that had sonic similarities to you, you just immediately were like, well, so these guys are my friends, whether they know it or not. And you were touring off the Running EP, but you hadn't even signed a Tooth and Nail at that point.
Right.
And I just remember being so like, oh my gosh, I love this band, like immediately. And I was floored. And I'm going to guess like those early days of when you guys started to, play outside of obviously your respective towns and go on tour and stuff like that. I'm guessing that a lot of people were kind of, I guess maybe surprised that you were good because, sometimes you run across bands that are just like, oh yeah, they're playing the show and whatever. But like, were a lot of people kind of like, oh my gosh, what's up with these guys? Where are they coming from? Or am I isolated in my experience?
Yeah, no, we did have that reaction a lot of times. I think we got the attention of a lot of bands early on, and we made a lot of good friends with bands, I think, before the people at the shows were catching on to it. But it was fair. It was, it was fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I also felt too, I mean, and I think most bands of that, era and or age group in your late teens / early 20s, you really do leave it all out on the floor, so to speak, where it's like, well, who knows if we're going to even be a band in 6 months, like not like you're thinking that far ahead, but you really did. It seemed to me that there was this nature of, well, we're going to try to convince people to like us by, completely just like pouring it all out. And that's also what attracted me to you guys as well.
Oh yeah, we left it there.
And I also, because I don't think you and I actually like physically formally shook hands, but I think I remember talking to Dusty or someone in the band. And it was one of those things where it felt like, because I know that you guys were like talking to Tooth and Nail, and it felt like there was that momentum where it was oh my gosh, like the future could unfold for us. And that just is, I don't know, that time of most bands' trajectories is always really exciting.
Well, were you guys on Goodfellow?
You 100%. Yep.
Yeah. So I remember anytime we would get any kind of attention from a band that was on like a cool label, like you guys were, and then the band was actually good, like you guys were, then we instantly felt like, $1 million. So getting to talk to you guys, I'm sure Dusty was pumped to be able to just chat. Like, yeah, this is, we're peers, this is somebody doing the same thing as me. We're just talking tooth and nail. They're totally on Goodfellow, but yeah, we're friends. It's no big deal. What?
I love that description because it does, like, there was that era of validation where the moment that somebody, even if it was like $200 they gave you to go record, you're like, we're on a record label, we're a valid band.
Yeah.
And even if it was that element too of just like, this is not really, as big, because Goodfellow like was run by one person, and he had a lot of cool things going on, and we felt very fortunate to be on the label, but by no stretch of the imagination was it ever a quote unquote big label. But you felt, like you said, that validation, and anybody else that existed in your sphere that signed to a label, it was like, oh, cool.
Here's the thing about the word big and cool in the same sentence, that it did not have to be big to be cool. I think that's what I loved about the whole thing. And I hope that you're recording this. Are you recording this?
Absolutely. Yes, I absolutely am.
Just for even the current context is that, to me, the bigger, I'm not trying to do the whole like, oh, the minute your band becomes big, you're a sellout. That's not at all what I believe. But there was still something unique and cool and almost black sheepish to, the small and niche styles and genres and regional sounds and labels that you could find. And if this one label put out one release that was cool, every other band that came on after them were cool too. So I didn't care about all the, I had friends going to Metallica and Rob Zombie concerts, and respect to all those guys for what they've paved. But to me, I was like, I felt cool because I was going to a show at our local, hardcore venue, 533, that Dave Owen from Code 7 pretty much ran with Paul from Azazel and a few other guys. And I felt cool because no one was there, which doesn't make sense. It's like, to me, that was cool.
Right. Well, I completely, I like the way that you described. There's a difference between, cool and big. And like, to us, big would have been, playing in front of, if you played in front of 100 people, you're like, dude, this is a packed out show. Yeah, holy moly. Right. Totally. The big was all relative in regards to the limited experience that we all had playing shows. And even if you play a legitimate venue, to your point, where it's like, oh, if we played 533, it's like, geez, that's the top of the mountain, baby.
Yes, that's all I wanted, man. That one hanging light bulb, the puddles on the ground. That's all I wanted.
That's all you wanted. Well, we'll dig into that a little bit later. But I actually like in just knowing you for as long as I have, there are certain basic biographical pieces of info that I'm like, were you actually born and raised in North Carolina, or where'd you come up?
Oh yeah, that's small town, tobacco town. I'm actually sitting in a home that's like about 1.5 miles from my original home. So I'm, I stayed local.
Yeah. North Cackalack forever. Right.
Right.
And what was the family structure like as you were growing up? Mother and father, brothers and sisters, what'd that look like?
I've got my dad, my mom, they were married for 41 years, and they got married in the 70s. My first brother was born in 76. I was born in 82. And then my sister was born 5 years after me. And, we pretty much look like what people would call like, your lower to middle to upper middle class family in Kernersville, North Carolina, that kind of thing. So I grew up outside of what we would consider a city here.
Sure.
Not what a lot of your listeners would consider a city, but Winston-Salem's, the closest kind of big city with a skyscraper in it. And we were just it just felt like we were just any old normal white bread kind of family, like just kind of plain people.
Sure. Yeah. Just the typical sort of, suburban / little rural because of where you were coming from experience.
Yeah. That was it.
Got it. And I know like you've explained and articulated in previous interviews in regards to your father passing away in 2016. And I realized, I realized this may be a, heavier question up top, but I think I'm sure now that you are a father and the reflection that you have of your kids in regards to, just your presence and the fact that, your father is not there to witness many aspects of it. How does that kind of inform who you are as a father? Or is that something that you don't necessarily think about too much until a person like me asks you that question?
No, I think about that every day, honestly. I don't think no one's ever asked me this kind of question on one of these podcasts, which is amazing.
There we go, Joe.
This is good. I try to live, and I fail often, as we all do, to be exactly who we really know we're supposed to be. But I try to be as present as possible, as cliche as it sounds. I mean, there's a lot of truth in a lot of cliches, and that one I think is so strong, is that just to be present and be available. And when you're with your kid, to give your kids attention, not just your attention, but your love, not just your love, but your care. So I just try to be there as much as possible.
Sure.
Just be engaged and active, and do what I can to let them know that, I was there, building memories, because that's all I've got now. That's probably what, tons of your listeners have, and tons of people have that experience of losing a family member. So the memories last.
Yeah, they do. And I think that the reason that I asked that is because I lost my father this was before my kid was born. I mean, my kid's 11 years old. But you reflect, like, especially once you start to understand that your parents were, just human and flawed like you, and were probably have no freaking clue how to raise a kid. Like, so many elements of that really start to become more clear as you get older, and then when you have kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's probably one of the only hopes that I have, is because I remember my dad as being someone that had it all together. And then, just like you're saying, I've had those thoughts where I'm like, he probably had no clue what to say, just like me in this moment when my 5-year-old kid rattled off some question or is just acting like a complete wild animal, and I don't know what to say to wrangle him in and not sound, like a terrible father. So
yeah. No, well, it's really cool that you can you not only feel close to him because of that, flawed nature of who we all are as humans. It's like, it does make you understand your parents at a such deeper level. It's so cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so as you were a kid growing up, like, what did you find yourself getting into? Were you an outdoor kid? Were you, art kid playing sports? Like, where'd you find yourself?
Yeah. So, during the summers, I was definitely that little redneck kid with the shaved head and jean shorts and no shirt on.
I love it.
No shoes, running up and down the street, screaming at cars. And then by the time we moved to my dad, got a promotion, we moved to the nice neighborhood in town. It changed a little bit. We were playing football out in the streets with all the different kids in the neighborhood. And I eventually met some kids that I went to church with who were, into punk and hardcore and metal and stuff. And they kind of started to pull me in the direction of music, and I started getting interested in that. And around the same time, picked up drums in middle school, and started just heading in that direction. So,
got it.
By the time middle school hit and high school hit, I was done with baseball. I played baseball growing up, and I think I was pretty decent. I was really good at running bases. I was very fast. That was like my pride, that I was super fast. My son thinks he's like the fastest kid on the planet, but on the soccer field, he forgets to actually, kick the ball half the time. He just runs right past it and watches his feet as he's running, like, well, I can move. Like, yeah, dude, but there's a ball there you were supposed to kick.
Right. I do love those little moments that you think about when you are a kid, that the moment that you feel like you're good at something and it has no bearing on anything. You're just like, oh, I'm faster than this person that's right next to me or whatever. And then that's your thing, I'm the fast person. Yeah. Or oh, I'm terrible at defense, but I can really hit the ball. That's going to be my thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Got to lean into it.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And so I did get the impression, and I know that you got into music at a relatively early age. Was drums no questions asked? That was the first thing that you gravitated towards, or you tried other things and you realized you were terrible at that, so you're going to be maybe less terrible at drums?
Yeah, so I think when I was super small, the first house that we lived at, I remember getting a Fraggle Rock drum set and lunchbox.
Okay.
And the drum set had paper drum heads on it, and I pretty much broke it the first day, but I loved playing them, so I played them as they were. And then there was a few years in between that, and then in 6th grade went into middle school band with a snare drum. Met the bros, met the Deaton brothers at my church, and starting to listen to music. And by the time I had done that for about a year and a half, here comes 8th grade. And, my parents were pretty much like, we'll buy you a drum set if you do this and do that and do this. So we ended up going and finding a drum set, and then it was just it was time to start a band. So yeah, that was 8th grade, I guess. Yeah, going into 8th grade, something like that.
Okay. That's relatively, I mean, I think most kids start to feel that pull towards music of their own around that age, but the idea that you want to create it, that's maybe a little bit early, but that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you care about school as you were, going to middle school and high school? Like, were you getting okay grades or just good enough to have your parents leave you alone?
I was never really good, and my dad never left me alone. I mean,
Okay.
I didn't have a driver's license until I was a senior in high school because my dad didn't budge on the, like, if you don't get your grades up thing, you won't get your license. And I didn't believe him until it became time in my head for me to get my license. And he's looking at me like, what are you talking about? I told you if your grades don't come up, you're not getting your license. And so we put off, I was doing driver's ed like a year after all of my other friends. And so I guess it would have been like a senior in high school. I finally get my license, and, I feel cool, but I'm a year behind everyone else's cool at that point.
Right. I just love the notion of the standoff between you and your dad. Be like, he's not really serious about it.
Yeah. So my grades were terrible.
Okay.
But by the time 12th grade came around, I don't know why my dad succeeded, but he just finally was like, okay, this is who you are. He was like, please get out of high school and do it like, not just by the skin of your teeth. So my teachers definitely helped me out. I had multiple teachers pull me aside the day before graduation. They were like, Joe, because I like you, I'm giving you an extra 20 points on your grade just to get you out of here. So I was like, thank you so much.
Well, and it's funny because that, from what I know of you and, our brief time hanging out, like, you've always been the relatively happy-go-lucky and like an easy dude to hang out with. And I imagine that level of not like I would call it charm, but I do imagine teachers running to that, or it's like, Joe's a nice kid, like he hasn't disrupted class, like let's just get him out of here.
I wasn't a troublemaker. I hung out with all the troublemakers.
Right.
I was the kid that prayed for all my troublemaker friends. They would come to me when they had a life crisis, but other than that, they were doing their thing. I was doing mine, but I didn't cause trouble for my teachers often
Right.
enough.
Right. Yeah. So they felt endeared towards you. So they were going to, get you a D+ or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And I know that you mentioned like you met some of your friends at church and youth group, and that's such a formative part of, music discovery and everything. When did you feel, and again, this is a very large question, but when did you feel like you, I guess, chose your faith for yourself? Because everybody goes through those, like, oh, do I even believe in a God, or what's the deal?
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up with parents who had like very radical conversion, if you'll call that conversion moments.
Okay.
And the church that we went to, is like it's called an Assembly of God church. So it's a kind of a Pentecostal, very wild, speaking in tongues, kind of, loud music, drums in the 80s, drums in the 70s and 80s. You didn't have that at a lot of churches, guitar players. So it's a different kind of thing. So, I'm falling in love with music as a kid because of the church music that I'm hearing, I guess not even realizing it. But yeah, that was absolutely formative to me, kind of making it through middle school and high school. My faith was important, but it wasn't until, I had a moment where, I believe with everything that I am that, Scripture says that the Holy Spirit actually indwells people, and that there was a moment where my life became different because the Holy Spirit, kind of came right smack dab into the middle of my being when I surrendered myself, probably in like 12th grade. It was just a heart thing. It's a it's a hard thing where you say to God, either with your lips, your heart, or everything that you are, that I can't do this on my own, and I want you, to help me. And that was 12th grade.
That's cool. No, I the reason I asked that question is because it's so, I know it's very easy to make fun of, Christian hardcore and like all of that.
Sure.
It's like lowest hanging fruit, but the people that not only quote unquote live through that and are just like, well, yeah, like I'm a Christian and that defines me, but like I'm also, straight edge, like all these other things that like come into play, and you really start to understand a person on a deeper level when it's like, well, when did you actually like want to do that, as opposed to like your friends were just doing that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such an important moment.
No, it totally is. It totally is.
Yeah.
And so as you started to get into music, and like you said, drums, and it really took up most of your oxygen and free time, I'm guessing, like as you started to enter high school, did you immediately get drawn towards obviously the heavy stuff, or was that kind of, were you like a pop punk kid for a couple of months and then like, oh no, I like this heavier stuff? Or what was the journey there?
I think for me, dude, I was just kind of like, it's like one of those like drinking from a fire hose things, and you just take it all in. I was discovering death metal at the same time that I was discovering ska.
I love everything's right. Everything's cool. Right.
So, and you just believe your friends. You just believe them. They give you a CD or a tape. They're like, dude, I made you a tape, or here's a CD. And you just try your best to fall in love with it because that's what your friends are doing, So I did that. And I think it was like just slowly what stood out to me were, the Strong Arms and the Snapcase CDs, and eventually, like, I heard Zayo, and I heard Living Sack, and then I heard Strife, and then so it just kind of, I was equal parts listening to like Christian bands, and then finding out about the bands, that were doing it, that weren't Christian, and then finally discovering, the Prayer for Cleansing and Undying shows,
Right.
Code 7, and all of that stuff.
Let's talk about merch and the great people at rockabilia.com. They have over 500,000 items that are officially licensed from bands, which means the bands get paid appropriately. None of this bootleg stuff that exists out there. But most importantly, you can use this promo code for 10% off your entire order. 100 words or less. Please use that. It tells them that the podcast sent them to their website and purchased. Maybe you're like super into hymn. They got some hymn shirts. Maybe your dad likes Jimmy Page. Boom, done. Or maybe your mom needs a new Clash t-shirt, or how about a Chris Cornell t-shirt? I just name all those random bands because it shows you the wide swath of stuff that they stock. Ships from the Midwest, amazing customer service, and it's independently owned. All these things are great as far as I'm concerned. And plus there's, some punk hardcore kids that work there. So please support Rockabilia. Use the promo code 100 words or less, 10% off your entire order. Enjoy shopping on that website.
Hi, I'm David Eagleman. I have a new podcast called Inner Cosmos on iHeart. I'm a neuroscientist and an author at Stanford University, and I've spent my career exploring the 3-pound universe in our heads. On my new podcast, I'm going to explore the relationship between our brains and our experiences by tackling unusual questions so we can better understand our lives and our realities. Like, does time really run in slow motion when you're in a car accident? Or can we create new senses for humans? Or what does dreaming have to do with the rotation of the planet? So join me weekly to uncover how your brain steers your behavior, your perception, and your reality. Listen to Inner Cosmos with David Eagleman on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I always found it interesting because there was this, real, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, there were, bands like Prayer for Cleansing and Undying were, distinctively anti-God and anti-religion. And like, did you ever feel for lack of a better term, like judgment in regards to your participation in the scene? Not like you were getting frozen out by, Jimmy Chang or anything like that, but,
Yeah.
like, did you feel any of that, or was that just like, whatever, like, I just like the music?
I think there's a part of every person that struggles. I've had people come up to me and they're like, dude, I love your band, man, but it's real hard to try and sing along to some of your lyrics because, you guys are Christian and I'm not. And I'm like, dude, I totally get it, because I used to listen to Undying, This Day All Gods Die, and it just would rip me to shreds how much I love this album. And then I would also consider how opposed they were to what I believed in. But then here's the important moment, is that you have a conversation with someone in that band and you find out that you're not too far off from where they're at. And so, when I'm young, I'm not considering all this lofty thought, but it's like the humanity kind of starts to wash over where you're all the points that you disagree on someone. And for me, coming up in North Carolina, every band that I listened to had some kind of thing that they stood on, some kind of soapbox. That's what attracted me to Undying so hard, is because Tim would get up there and he would just preach whatever message he felt like. And I felt like that I could do the same thing with what I believed in. So even though his beliefs were not inspirational to me, his effort and the way he believed in everything that he screamed and the lyrics that he wrote, like he really truly believed that inspired me to stand where I was, which is weird because I feel like I'm on the complete opposite end of the field, but I have so much respect for those people. And eventually you get to know them and you're like, wow, I'm friends with Jimmy. Like Jimmy says, hey, what's up, Joe? It's like, whoa,
Totally.
I thought you hated me. It's now like, no. So, Steve from Day of Suffering, and Sect, like you're just getting to know different kinds of people, and you figure out that there should be some kind of common ground when you're standing in a place like 533 with those people that do have opposing beliefs of you. There should be something that's bringing you together, and it's the music and it's the community and the camaraderie and, just the essence of hardcore and metalcore, so
right.
I mean, that's it.
No, I'm getting goosebumps of you saying that, because it does feel like, especially when you are understanding the differences between people's different beliefs and what have you in our subculture. And usually when you start to think about it, you're like, okay, they as in, whoever is espousing their hatred towards, religion or, drinking or whatever, it's usually the systems and the structures that they are actually, you're not smart enough to articulate that as a kid, but like you realize you're like, okay, you don't have a problem with me. You have a problem like with religion, which like, like there's some of it that's kind of sucks. I get it. Like, and so like you said, you start to see the similarities of them rallying against a system as opposed to like you as an individual, know? Yeah. I just love that, that view that you have where it's like, oh yes, like even though we do have differing opinions, like I still admire their conviction. And that's something that's way more meaningful than a person who's just, vanilla their whole life.
That's the word I was looking for. Conviction. That's it. That's what attracts me to any band, a band that has conviction about what they're saying. And it can be the most off-putting thing to me. And sometimes, I just leave it alone. But a lot of times I'm like, dude, I got so much respect for somebody who will stand up in the middle of a room of people that could potentially hate what they have to say, and yet they'll say it. Obviously, there are some things that I don't support. That we all, I think, in the hardcore community and punk community and metal community, we wouldn't necessarily say we're in love with as far as views and things. And I understand there's so much discord and tension right now. There's just so much unnecessary things, but I feel the call back to just getting in a room together and just playing as passionate as you can and sharing what it is that is in your heart. To me, that's important, man. And sometimes it's just like all you've got in your heart is like mosh MFers, like that's all you can say. But for me, mine's a little different.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally get it. And so when you start, I'm guessing Beloved is not your first band. I presume there was, some bad metalcore stuff you were, and I use bad in air quotes maybe because, maybe it was cool. But usually first bands are pretty pale comparisons. But what did you do kind of initially?
So punk, there was a band called Public Rage that I started with
Ooh, okay.
Josh and Isaac Deaton. Isaac Deaton was in a band on Tooth and Nail called Ace Troubleshooter.
Oh, I definitely remember that band. Yeah.
So he ended up, he was out like, a couple years ahead of me and kind of helped. I had eyes on him, when he was doing his thing.
Sure.
And so we started a band, us three, and a guy named Jacob Myrick. So it was Public Rage, which I think is kind of a cool name.
Dude, well, I close my eyes and I love the names of first bands because you can immediately tell what they sounded like. And I'm like, oh yeah, Public Rage. I totally get what you sounded like.
Yeah, dude. A band called State of Mind that myself and some of the original Beloved guys started together. And there was a band called Into Your Arms that was like that NC, metalcore kind of sound, like melody driven lead parts into breakdowns, and the melody lead parts into breakdowns.
Yes.
Into a breakdown with a melody lead part, so that from there, yeah, Public Rage into State of Mind into Your Arms, and then I got kicked out of Into Your Arms because I couldn't make a couple practices in a row. Because my grades weren't good enough.
Sure, dude. Sounds like a theme, Joe.
Yeah,
I could get my driver's license, and then maybe I couldn't make practices because I didn't have a driver's license. But there's one common problem here.
We played some shows with. I mean, some people will remember. You might even remember Azazel.
Oh, heck yeah, of course.
Yeah, so we
Tribal Unit Records' finest.
That's right.
Yep.
We played with them, and we played with some other, North Carolina people. And by the time they kicked me out, they were playing with like Undying and Prayer for Cleansing and Hope's Fall in the early days,
Oh, I love that. And I'm guessing too that it was pretty exciting for you to exist within the region that you were, because there was, I know me being from Southern California, like the moment that I, started to really attend shows and start to pay attention to, kind of specific scenes and stuff, North Carolina always had this like, oh yeah, it's either like unbelievably good technical metalcore or, metalcore infused with melody. And I'm just like, there's so much stuff popping off there. Did it feel like that for you as you started to go to shows?
Oh yeah. And what's crazy is like last night I was thinking about us getting to have this chat, and I was like, man, I hope we just bring up those regional sounds that every area of the country had, and those little scenes, the way it just felt so unique and like tribal in a cool way, not in a bad way, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And I think that we were, and I know this is like completely old man on the porch looking at like, things through rose colored glasses, but that idea of, we were like on the infancy of the internet. So like we sort of had an idea. I mean, I know you guys Beloved existed a little bit later in the MySpace era, but just that idea that like when you did find a band that was like doing something that was similar to you, it was almost by the only reason you found it was because like, oh, they got a record on Eulogy and they kind of sound like us. Like, that's cool. Like I'm going to email their AOL email address in the liner notes or whatever. Like it did feel so, like everyone was operating on their own levels and their own scenes. And then it was only because of the broader spectrum of record labels and that distro network or whatever, where you started to realize there was stuff happening elsewhere.
Yeah. That thing that all the old guys talk about where they're like, I used to read the thank yous, the thank you lists and figure out what other bands were out there. That kind of speaks into this too. You kind of find out who was pre-internet, who were playing with your favorite bands, who might be influencing your favorite bands, who were peers to your favorite bands you hadn't yet heard of, unless some guy on a tour came through 533 with a distro. Like I remember seeing the distros and getting to hear of the different bands from around the country. And it would just blow my mind that there was so much happening that I had yet to see or hear or experience. And then here comes the internet. Here comes those, I can't remember what the websites were that we used to build. Angel Fire.
Oh yeah.
Angel Fire websites or
Totally.
something.
GeoCities. Yeah.
Yeah. GeoCities. Wow. Holy crap.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Where you just had like any digital footprint, and like it was such a big deal to have a website, and it was like, oh my gosh, like this is so cool. Like someone could just randomly find our website and email us because they liked our band or whatever. It's it sounds like we're 175 years old when we talk about that, but
so funny.
It is absolutely hilarious.
Evilgreed.net is the best web store solution provider for record labels and bands. And why do you care about that? That's because they ship all that stuff directly to you. They are an amazing company because they have a very specific point of view about the sort of bands that they include and record labels they include on their website. But first, I have to give you a promo code that gets you 10% off your entire order. 100 words, and go to evilgreed.net, and maybe you can pick up, maybe you want to pre-order the new Yob record, or maybe you want to be like, you know what, I think I really need a new short sleeve obituary t-shirt. Or how about, that Nothing Integrity split 7-inch. I name all of these things because they have a very specific point of view in regards to the fact that they're working with artistic heavy stuff. That's my own description of what Evil Greed does. They're based in Berlin, Germany, but they ship worldwide. And trust me in saying that we here in the United States benefit from the exchange rates currently, and shipping is very fast. I've ordered from them before, and I got an order in less than 7 days, which is amazing from Germany. And that's why they're focusing on you, the podcast listener, because they know that you like merch, you like vinyl, you want to buy it directly from evilgreed.net. 100 words is the promo code, and you'll be able to shop to your heart's content at evilgreed.net. Thank you for your continued support.
Hi, I'm David Eagleman. I have a new podcast called Inner Cosmos on iHeart. I'm a neuroscientist and an author at Stanford University, and I've spent my career exploring the 3-pound universe in our heads. On my new podcast, I'm going to explore the relationship between our brains and our experiences by tackling unusual questions so we can better understand our lives and our realities. Like, does time really run in slow motion when you're in a car accident? Or can we create new senses for humans? Or what does dreaming have to do with the rotation of the planet? So join me weekly to uncover how your brain steers your behavior, your perception, and your reality. Listen to Inner Cosmos with David Eagleman on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
When you started, once Beloved came into the picture and you started, focusing on that, was there any sort of life path for you in regards to like, oh, I'm going to follow in the footsteps of what my parents did? Or like you said, school wasn't exactly your forte. Was there any idea of what you wanted to kind of do with your life?
It's weird, man, how this life works out, because you have people tell you what they think you're going to do. And then you always have the picture of what you think you're going to do, and then what your parents think you're going to do. And then, so I had lots of people always tell me like, you're, in youth group, we're one of those churches where people would walk up to you and tell you things that they didn't actually know, right. Or maybe, you couldn't prove that what they were telling you was real. And I'd have people come up to me and say, you're going to be on the stage and you're going to be preaching the gospel for people and you're going to be doing this. And I'd just like, what the heck are you talking about?
Totally.
I just bought, a freaking death metal album.
Right. Hey, you want to check out Hammer Smash Face by Cannibal Corpse? It's pretty sick.
Literally, that's what I was going to say, dude. That is so funny. I just bought Progression Through Unlearning by Snapcase. So, that's where my brain was. So,
right.
I'd have people speak those kind of things in my life. And then my parents, obviously, my dad had a track he wanted me to go. He didn't go to college. He went to, he served in the Army during the Vietnam War and came back and went to like a technical, a technology college here, ECPI or something like that, and kind of, he went the hard road, what he considered the hard road. And my mom didn't go to college. And so he wanted something better for me, more traditional. And I think by the time I hit 12th grade, I had my moment with God, and I was starting Beloved. This is 1999. We started in 99. I just felt like I was going to play music, but I had no way to prove it and no way to back it up. Nowhere to stand other than what I could feel was coming down the road. And so I just went with that, man. Like, I don't know. And my life has just ended up the way it is because I just, just took a chance, took a risk.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get it.
And it could have totally fallen apart and not worked out. And you and I wouldn't be having this conversation, but for some reason it worked out long enough that our paths crossed. And
right. Yeah.
So,
no, it's a very,
for that.
Right. And I mean, I think that whole, everything happens for a reason is really, blown out of proportion by a lot of people. But there is that, especially when you talk about the things that are less common that people experience, like getting involved with our subcultures and, pursuing the creative arts, whatever it may be. Like those are way more unconventional paths because there's no safety net. And it's not like you can articulate exactly what you're trying to do, but you're just like, I'm pulled to this. I got to like do this as long as I can before the wheels fall off or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you started to, because I also, I mean, I know this is just like giving compliments back and forth to each other, but I've always loved the way that you've played drums because not only do you hit hard, I mean, clearly you are a very passionate individual. I mean, it's easy for people to be like, of course he's passionate because he's yelling into a microphone. It's like, well, whatever. But I've always admired the way that you played drums. Was that like, did you take lessons, self-taught? Was this just like, oh, I want to hit these things as hard as humanly possible?
I think it's probably like a mix from there. I think I took like 2 lessons at a like a music shop. And then I just played in bands and we just practiced a lot, for a high school band, we were practicing like 2 nights a week. In my parents' basement.
God bless your parents for just putting up with that racket, huh?
They went through so much.
It's always funny too, because it like 99% of the time, it always ends up being at the drummer's house because that's a pain in the butt to like load it over to someone else's house. So it's just like, well, I guess we have a basement, so I guess let's do it here. Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's again, I mean, so much of our hardcore and punk scene is all contingent upon parents' tolerance for loud music. It's like, it's so like unbelievable that it even happened.
Yes.
Yes. Did you, as you started to get Beloved together and, tour and start to experience more outside of, your own local scene, did you take to touring? Was that hard for you? I know that you're generally speaking an outgoing person, but tour is definitely the next level of outgoing nature that people need to kind of embody. Did you enjoy it initially?
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. I think the first tour we did was probably close to like 2.5, almost 3 months long or something like that. Besides the first week-long tour where every show got canceled, that kind of thing. That's a whole
course. Right.
Thing. But, it just felt like, we're all 18 and our singer is 16 or 17 years old, Josh, and we're just out figuring out who we are in a van with a trailer, with a map. There's no cell phones. The cell phone that we had, there's no map on it. So you're holding a map in the passenger seat, trying to figure out where to go. with barely enough money to get there anyway. But it just felt like an adventure, and it was just so cool. Even if just one kid from, Cedar Rapids, Ohio, or I'm sorry, Iowa knew who we were, or, Rock Island, Illinois, or, it just took the hope that one person would be into your band, to keep you going to the next show. So I loved it, man. I loved it. Yeah.
Right. I love it. It really is that those little moments that kind of keep you rooted in just why you're not only having fun and enjoying this, but it's like, it isn't the fact that, oh my gosh, we played in front of 500 people or whatever. It's like, oh dude, like, we sold 10 copies on vinyl or whatever. Like, that's why I can't believe we did that or whatever. It's like those little earmarks that are so unpredictable. The idea that, Beloved, like, definitely you guys hit the road very hard, and many people would argue it's like, oh, you guys burned out bright because you disbanded because of the intricacies of what it takes to obviously keep a band going. And I know you guys were in the process of writing your second LP, but as it started to become clear that this maybe wasn't sustainable, how were you kind of approaching the idea of like the next, step in your life? Was it, were you fearful because there's the unknown road is in front of you, or is it like, oh, I'm not going to be known as Joe from Beloved anymore or whatever? How was it kind of going through your head as that was happening?
Dude, I don't even know if I considered all of that, but I know that, as I started to feel like I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it on any more tours or being gone from home. Soon, come to find out pretty soon, I actually did want to be in a band. I just didn't want to be in this band because, I just convinced myself there wasn't a place for me in it anymore with all this drama. But I just got to a point where I was unhappy with something, and I still have a hard time, really pinning the tail on the donkey there, very well. But, I was getting ready to get married, and, I had kind of probably fabricated some issues in my head between myself and who was jumping in as our manager. He was a great guy, and he was just starting off and trying to do his best. And, he was actually coming through with a lot of hookups and a lot of connections, and he wanted us to do the best that we could. And I just felt something drawing me out of it. And so I used him coming in as an excuse for me to, kind of bounce out. And I don't think I was necessarily afraid of what was next or who I would be if I wasn't Joe from Beloved, because faith kind of calls you into a place where, it's unknown, and you just have to step into it sometimes. And I think I felt pretty solid that, I would just be whoever I was supposed to be. I've kind of been like a surfer, like if it's meant to be, it's meant to be kind of guy, like I've always been that way. So,
that's what you were
in, and I jumped ship,
right.
So.
And I always, I know just from the outsider's perspective, there was that idea of just the, so many, this mostly just, stupid internet chatter of just like, oh yeah, Beloved broke up because, the drummer's super Christian and wants to like be married or whatever. That's the only thing he can concentrate on. And I just always found that so like, it's so reductive, but it's just like,
people are ridiculous sometimes.
Totally. Where it's like, I'm sure that is an element, but also it's like, they're like, touring isn't all that it's made up to be when you're gone 200 and some odd days out of the year. So it's like, there's a lot of reasons that it probably comes to, but yeah, I just always found that, especially the idea where it's like, it's so easy to be like, oh yeah, they're a Christian band. Of course. Like, he wants to have a family. So like, yeah, there's no way they could be a band and tour anymore.
Yeah.
So funny. So as you know, pivoted out of Beloved and, you know, I mean, clearly like, you know, hardcore and punk and heavy music has always been very, you know, important to you. Was it almost not immediately, because I know there was obviously a couple of years before Advent started. Was it, did you kind of flip that switch relatively quickly to be like, oh yeah, I want to be in a band again, but I'm just not like, you know, we're going to play 5 shows a year max or whatever?
So even though it was a couple years before the release came out between Beloved's, you know, last show and Advent's first release there in 2008, we started, Beloved played our last show January 14th of 2005.
Okay.
And we were recording our demo, and we played our first show with Turmoil on April 30th of 2005.
I love that. I knew there was a shortish period of time. I just didn't know how short it was. I love that though.
So, you know, I think I instantly felt, you know, the gaping hole in my chest of like, okay, I stepped out from what I'm meant to do. So let me try it again, you know, with relatively the same guys, because we can't go back to where we were. You know, we tried to put the thing to bed, and, you know, Josh was ready to move on, and, you know, there was just some tension.
Of course.
Not that we all weren't friends anymore, but it was just, you know, that's just natural, you know?
Yeah.
And Johnny and Matt and myself, we were recording our 3-song demo, and our first show was with freaking Turmoil, which is one of my favorite bands of all time. So
totally.
Instantly that feels like, okay, well, this is the right move, you know?
Right. No, I just love how simple that is, where it's like, oh yeah, let's get something together. And then it's just like, wait, you can play a show with Turmoil? It's like, oh yeah, of course. This is absolutely right fit. Perfect. Done. And it always seemed to me too with Advent, you and everybody else in the band was very focused on, you know, basically hitting exactly what you wanted to do with the classics, where it's like, yes, we want to rip off Turmoil. We had, like, you know, just basically standing on the shoulders of all of those bands, putting your own twist on it, obviously.
Yeah.
But it seems like pretty much from the get-go, that was like what you always wanted to do. And I'm guessing that, I mean, just sonically, that's what you did. So I'm guessing that was basically the core of the band.
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, we found the bands that we loved. I mean, Matt and I and Johnny, dude, we listened to Buried Alive and All Out War and Turmoil and I'm trying to think of Converge. I mean, the early Converge stuff, dude, there's nothing that beats that. And so we just fell in love with that stuff and tried to figure out a way to make a band that was like that in a blender, you know, and sometimes we nailed it, sometimes we didn't, but it takes a long time, I think, for a band to truly find their stride, and unless they're just like these, you know, super focused musicians, and I'm too much of a scatterbrain to nail it on the first go round. So it always takes a couple tries for me. But
Right. Like, you know what? Like the first couple releases are us kind of getting, you know, the cobwebs off, so to speak. And then, you know, once we get to like our second or third EP and or LP, like, you know, we're dialed in there.
Oh yeah.
This, I know, like you were talking about, you know, dedicating yourself to not only your faith as a human being, but like that's been your profession as far as like working in the church and, you know, filling a lot of different roles within there. The joke and cliche of like a cool youth pastor like clearly exists.
I know where this is going.
Totally. Where it's just like, I mean, how do you not really like, I guess, fall into that trap of just like, oh dude, Joe's edgy. He's got tattoos. Like he's totally going to like, you know, increase our youth group by like 30% or whatever. Like how do you, I guess, I don't know. I mean, not like you can change yourself because that is who you are, but like, you know, how is that played into your life of not falling into that, you know, cliche swamp?
Dude, Oh man, that's been the narrative of the last like 10 years of my life is trying
Okay.
to figure this out.
Sure. I know there's no probably easy answer to it, but I'd feel remiss if I did not bring it up.
I I sincerely appreciate it because I think this is something that myself and a few of my other friends that have kind of had a similar path and you know where we're all at. It's like, man, like, you know, we obviously were like people of faith. Yes, we ended up as youth pastors or pastors of churches. And yes, people think that we went and got tattoos as some kind of evangelist tool in order to go out and win souls, you know, on the street corners. But
Right.
man, like, I think I was just, the truth is that I was a kid who's always had, you know, faith that got turned on even more while I was out there living on the road as a punk and hardcore kid, living against the grain of what society tells you to do in the punk and hardcore way. And then also in the Christian way of living against the grain of what the culture is telling you to do mixed into one person. And so I'm the person who, and sometimes you feel like you're living against the grain of what the church is telling you to do by being involved in hardcore and punk. So you're always in conflict.
Mhm.
You know, there's always that. So for me as a youth pastor, I feel like I get the kids who really struggle with where they're at. Like, I love God, but I can't see him. I'm really interested in this stuff over here in left field, but my parents are telling me to do this in right field. And I don't know what to do, Pastor Joe. What should I do? And so I get in there and I live with them for a year and get to know them and you know, just guide them in life because I've kind of been in their shoes in some sort of way. But, you know, being real, being you, I think is important in anything that you do, any profession. And I just happen to be that cliche, goofy youth pastor with freaking,
Right.
you know, his palms tattooed, you know, from the top of his head down to his feet, you know, like,
Yeah.
and I didn't do it to be cool. And I didn't do it to like, whoa, you know, like, you know, be edgy in the church. Like it just is that way. But I think it's so funny that is like where, you know, the evangelical position on tattoos and stuff has kind of like moved where it's like, okay, if you can get a cool tattooed guy in your church, now, you know,
Now we're talking.
You can market him to a certain group. It's like, dude, you know, Jesus actually, if we look at the Jesus of Scripture, you know, the religious people of the day called him a glutton and a drunkard because he was already there, you know, with the people that culture were rejecting. He was already, I'm not saying he was a tattooed person. He wasn't, but
Right.
He was Jewish. So he would not be tattooed, but, you know, he tells us to go down into the gutters and intentionally that's who he goes after and that's who he has mercy on and that's who he chooses. So why would I not, how could I have a problem with identifying with those people and living my life in that way? And then also, you know, living as a person of faith or a person in a church position or a person in a hardcore band on tour, like that all just seems, for my life, it's like the perfect amalgamation of everything that I am and everything that I've given myself to.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the description there because it definitely is, like you said, the fact that like culture has caught up to the point of where, you know, I mean, like you're talking about like tattoos, they weren't mainstream 15, 20 years ago, but it's like now there's nothing edgy about a tattoo. It's like everybody has
exactly.
Yeah.
Dude, I'll have kids come up to me in the youth group and they're like, Pastor Joe, I'm thinking about getting a tattoo. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Just don't. You'll be the new outcast by not having a tattoo.
Totally. Yeah. You want to know how this stuff works? It's all cyclical. So right now, tattoos, cool. Go against the grain. Be like as like plain Jane as possible as a human. Like, don't get your ears pierced. No weirdo lip piercings or anything like that. And you're golden. I do. It is interesting though. Like that. I mean, I personally also identify as Christian, and I like went to private Christian Lutheran schools like my whole life, and I remember the idea of like when I first started to get into punk and hardcore and claiming straight edge and getting into vegetarianism and veganism. I remember, and I the reason I'm bringing this story up is because I think that you'll identify with it. I remember my high school, like, I mean, it was a relatively small school, and everybody, like, I made it abundantly clear that I was straight edge, and like, I would X up to school. Let me put it that way. Yeah, but I would but Joe, let me be very clear. I only X'd up one hand. That like, I wasn't going to X up both hands, like, cause that's like formal straight edge. Oh my God, just so stupid. Like kid logic, I call it. Anyways. So I distinctly remember there at one point in the front office, a person posted, this is, in the 90s when straight edge was clearly very violent and gang mentalities and stuff. Focus on the Family magazine did an article on straight edge, and they like, what? Dude, it was crazy. If I can find it still, cause I kept it. So in the front office, they like posted this up. Like the bulletin board or whatever, being like, watch out for this, like teachers, straight edge is a gang or whatever. It was just like a little piece, but I remember seeing it. I was so pissed because I was like, dude, I'm the only damn kid in this whole school that's claiming edge. Like clearly, like just talk to me. Like you'll know that I'm not part of a gang or whatever. But anyways, the reason I bring that up is because not only would I know that you'd find that funny, but it did feel like that extra layer of like, yo, like you may be Christian, but I'm like, dude, I'm not even like messing around with alcohol, dog. Like we're not even doing any of this. Like I'm extra level gold star straight edge or whatever. It's so ridiculous, but these are the things you go through.
Dude, that's wild. You got to send me that.
I do, because it really was. I mean, and I like now as an adult, I understood the sort of sensational nature of straight edge when it started to get on the news and stuff. But like, I felt so targeted. I'm like, listen, guys, like, is this really what you're going to post on the school message board? Because you're worried about, me infiltrating as a gang in the school. Like, calm down. Jeez. Anyways. Last two things I want to hit on before I let you go was the like you mentioned, strong arm. I know was a huge influence on you, and you've clearly sprinkled that throughout the music that you've created. Like, how mind numbing was it for you to sing with them? And like, was it? I mean, I'm sure it felt like an out of body experience. Like, I don't know. Walk me through that, because that must have been ridiculous.
Dude, yeah. So that whole day, I mean, obviously, it was the first Furnace Fest back. In 2021, it was originally supposed to be 2020. Obviously, that gets canceled, gets moved to 2021. I started off the day, we did like this crazy meet and greet line, and it literally, any band that was there can tell you, this thing lasted for like 6.5 hours, dude. Our merch line was, it did not stop until we ran out of merch, which was crazy.
Right.
And, so I did that, and I'm talking and yelling to people, and thank you, thank you, thank you, and it's just so wild. And then I go from there to eat a meal, and then immediately went on stage and screamed with Bruce had called me. Bruce from Living Sack had called me like a couple weeks beforehand and was like, "Do you want to scream on Enthroned?" which is my favorite Living Sacrifice song. I have 2 words from that song tattooed on the tops of my hands. Like, so of course I'm going to. So I screamed that. Then Beloved plays our set. And by the time Beloved gets done, I barely had a voice left. But I was preparing myself all day,
right.
to scream for Strong Arm at the end of the night, which I guess was supposed to kind of be like a surprise. The further guys were playing, and they have been asked over and over and over and over for years to get Strong Arm back together. And this was their chance. For some reason, they thought this would be the year. And Jason reached out to me and was like, "Dude, would you want to scream?" And I'm like, this is I still don't even know how to
right. It sounds like I just brought the idea up to you. That's amazing.
We'll just go there. This is ... You fill in the blank. the craziest moment of my life, that my favorite band of all time, one of my other favorite bands of all time, and then the first band that really struck a chord in our scene for me, what I touched, I'm doing all three of those things in the same day. So it was kind of like, by the end of the day, I remember getting back to the hotel after I had screamed. And dude, I didn't even have a voice by the time I screamed that Strong Arm song.
Right.
So it was like, so I was just kind of like, I was just yelling, yell screaming the words and talk screaming the words and stuff. By the time I got back to the hotel, we got to the hotel, get home the next day, I remember just laying in my bed, and it was like emotional, man. I was kind of an emotional wreck in like a happy way. Like,
right.
Holy crap, dude. Like, you could tell me I was going to get on stage with John Mayer and get to play some really cool song with John Mayer or some other huge artist in front of 1 million people, or I could scream, Advent of a Miracle with Strong Arm, and I would choose that every day of the week, because that song and that album and the way that band, just approached everything that they did, was a part of saving my life. So I'm going to choose that every day, and I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
That's how much it meant to me.
I love that. I do. I would be able to elicit that sort of reaction from you, but I love that expression. The last thing, and obviously, everybody that ever since Beloved played again, everyone's like, so you're obviously going to release new music. You're going to, play some more reunion shows. You're going to do all this other stuff. Clearly you guys are basically just being like, well, we exist and we'll do stuff when we want to. Do you feel that, I wouldn't say pull, but like, once you have like come back and played a show and people were so ecstatic about it, like, I know you don't feel the pull to like jump on the hamster wheel again, where it's like, all right, cool, let's go play 150 shows out of the year.
Yeah.
But does that pull feel any different because of this experience, or is it basically just sitting in that, not box, because box makes it sound like it's just off to the side or whatever,
Right.
but it could be, but, yeah. What do you, how do, in me talking about that, how does that, kind of ping pong around your head?
Yeah. So I think we've all come to a place where we've gotten in a room together and tried to be creative multiple times. And we've had some really good moments, and we've had some moments where we all I bet we all drove away and we're like, cause I drove away and I'm like, man, this is not as easy as it used to be.
Totally.
And we get offers all the time, dude. I've got probably 15 text messages on my phone from people within the last 3 months that are doing this and that. And,
yep.
We talk through the ones that, we talk through what we can, but I think we're all just in different places. And, so who knows?
Yeah, no. And
one of those who knows kind of situations. So.
Right. No. And I was mostly curious about just from the music creative perspective, because it does, I'm speaking from personal experience of, coming back with a band and dipping in and out and that sort of stuff. It does feel, it was way more intentional because there's so many extenuating factors of, families and life and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I really like the way you describe where it doesn't flow as easy. And that doesn't mean that the songs are better or worse that get created, but it's just like, it's a whole different dynamic.
Dude, it costs you something, when life has taken a different turn and you've got new things that you're holding in your hands, you have to put things down in order to really invest in art. Every artist knows that to create, you have to draw from somewhere. You have to pull from something, just like you were saying. You have to have a well to kind of like draw the water up out of, and so, and that the well really never dries up. I don't think in any artist. You just have to eventually get through all the dirt to get back down there. You can see it in many people's career paths where they take kind of a lull, and then they may put out a few stinkers here or there, but then finally they have that moment where everything coalesces together, and they finally put out that golden egg of an album or that piece of art or that movie. But for us, I don't know how much dirt we'd have to get through in each of us to kind of get to the gold. That good water. Josh is so creative and so brilliant, and Dusty is the melody man. He can just hear things, and Matt is an absolute riff monster, and Johnny just knows how to drive a freaking steamroller through the middle of a song with the way he plays bass. And I feel like I can hear guitar riffs while I play drums, and I can create and all this kind of stuff, but those are all hidden underneath the lives that we're living now. Yep. And so I think it just takes a lot for everybody to get in a room together. And I think, when you're younger and you're going to shows and you see all the familiar faces, and it doesn't really cost you that much to kind of get out every night and go support the bands. And then you see these older guys kind of come in and out and eventually drift away. Well, it's because, they've got kids now, and they've got jobs, and they've got this and that. And some guys keep going, some guys keep pouring into their scenes. And then, you've got a guy like me, and I choose like 7 or 8 local shows a year that I can go to, and a night that I can get away from the family, and I go. But man, to do a band, that really, it just takes even more. It takes even more than that. It's not just a night off here or there. Yep. It's a soul pursuit,
Yeah, for sure. And I
don't want it to be anything less than that, is why I think that we may or we may never do anything again, because I want it to be something that we pour out of an overflow of our lives,
Yeah, no, I really, I like what you're talking about, just the trade-off. Cause when you're younger, you have, essentially an infinite amount of time because, you're a loser and you're not doing anything. And then once you're older, you're like, oh, I got these responsibilities, and there is a trade-off. And it's just about, to your point, being deliberate about your time as you get older. Whereas it's like, is this something that I want to pursue because, I just like need to do this? Or is this something that like is actually going to give not only myself, but like, to your point, the creative output, the honesty it deserves, as opposed to just like, oh yeah, like, should we release a beloved EP that sucks? Like, probably not if we have a choice, right? Yeah. Well, Joe, I really appreciate you letting me hang out with you. And this has been great. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, this has been awesome. As soon as you sent me that message, I was like, for real? Like, you would really want to do that with me?
Absolutely, so Joe. Cool. No, you are a contributor to our scene, my friend, and it's my pleasure to document this conversation. So you're great. Thank you. Heck yes. What a great discussion Joe brought to the table. I like his introspection. I like when people, I ask a question or we're on a conversation, and then there's that thoughtful pause that people go into when they're really truly thinking about how they're going to respond to something. I genuinely enjoy that. I used to, at a much earlier age, felt like I needed to fill the space immediately with either conversation or response. And there's times where it's like, no, you can just let it sit for a minute. You can think about it. And Joe did that. And I just enjoy him as a human as well. So please check out Beloved or Advent if you haven't, because you undoubtedly will like one, if not both of the bands. And just, follow along with what they're doing because, they're great bands. Next week, I have another rad live chat. You guys really like these live chats. Like I'm seeing the downloads just go through the roof on these, which is awesome. Next week is Emma from Dying Wish and To the Gents from Foreign Hands on the show. I recorded this live at LDB Fest. I'm
churning out that content now. Did those interviews back in March or whenever the fest was. And now I'm getting to all these, which is great. But so we got modern metalcore episode coming right up. And until then, please be safe, everybody.
Hear that? That's the sound of peace, knowing your next travel adventure is sorted. At Intrepid Travel, we take care of everything, so you don't have to. Join a small group adventure in the United States or Canada and let our local leaders show you the hard-to-find spots in familiar destinations. Whether you're kayaking through the Alaskan wilderness or following the music trail from Nashville to New Orleans, Intrepid's trips will take you deeper, supporting local communities along the way. Head to intrepidtravel.com to book your next adventure. Intrepid Travel. Good trips only.
Ah, summer's here, and you know what that means. It's time to heat up your wardrobe at Lulu's, the only stop you need for affordable, high-quality, on-trend items that look as good as they feel. There are so many styles to choose from: swimsuits and shorts for beach days, dresses to make heads turn, and the perfect outfit for a music festival, date night, or any occasion. Create an account at lulus.com and use code LulusFan20 to save 20% off your first order. That's LulusFan20. Terms and conditions apply. See lulus.com for details.
Hi, I'm David Eagleman. I have a new podcast called Inner Cosmos on iHeart. I'm going to explore the relationship between our brains and our experiences by tackling unusual questions like, can we create new senses for humans? So join me weekly to uncover how your brain steers your behavior, your perception, and your reality. Listen to Inner Cosmos with David Eagleman on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.